In this video, I'm going to show off this huge book that I was able to score at TorpedoCon this weekend, and then talk about this idea of overcoming price memory. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, I got a huge book that I want to show off to you guys today. I was able to score this thing and land something I've wanted in my collection for a very, very long time. So I'm very excited to share it with you guys here today. But then later on in the video, I also want to talk about this idea of price memory because it really relates to this book for me personally. And I just think that it's an interesting subject within comic book collecting. But before I show off the book, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, do one of those things, and I would appreciate it. All right, that said, let me get into this here. And before I show it, I feel like I should set the stage a little bit, right? Set the stage. So I went into TorpedoCon and I had a little bit of a strategy. You know, a lot of people in the community always talk about, you know, when you're at cons, one of the things that you want to do is to make sure that you have a list, that you have targets that you're going after. And this is something that I definitely agreed with. I found that piece of advice very, very helpful as I went into TorpedoCon, because let me tell you, when I walked into that door and saw all the vendors and all the amazing books all over the place, it was really hard to, you know, focus on where I wanted to go. It's like you get pulled in so many different directions. There's keys like for days in every single booth. And, you know, if you don't know what you're after, you can very, very easily get sidetracked and very easily spend money on books that you ultimately didn't really want. So going into TorpedoCon, I made a list of all the books that I felt like I wanted to get for myself. Of course, this included some Avengers stuff, and this also included some other things, one of them being the book that I'm going to show you here today. And with those books, I wrote down for myself what the grades I wanted to get for them. And then I did a lot of research, looking up like, okay, what is the going rate for these books at that grade? What is the price point that I'm willing to spend? What is the window, you know, within that? If I could see a deal and work a deal, it would be worth grabbing that book. So when I walked into the con, basically I started by just surveying the floor and looking at all of the wall books, seeing if I could find the ones that I was specifically targeting. And sure enough, I definitely saw it. I mean, in fact, I saw it multiple times. So I basically went up to each booth and you know, asked to see the book, saw what they were charging for it, and, you know, passed over a lot of ones that I felt like were either in too high of grade for me to, you know, feel like I could afford, or were too overpriced for what I felt that specific grade was worth. So eventually I came across one booth that incidentally not only had one of the books that I was after, but actually had two of the books that I was after at pretty decent grades at pretty decent prices. So I asked the vendor who was working the booth, I said, hey, can I see this book and that book? And he pulled them off and showed them to me. And I looked over them and I, you know, inspected it, and they were right around the grades that I felt like, you know, I was comfortable getting. And, you know, he had the certain prices on them, and combined those sticker prices were definitely higher than I wanted to spend for the book. So I basically said, hey, you know, if I paid cash and I got both of these books together, could you do this number? And I gave him my number, which was essentially like, you know, a very fair deal, but like, you know, better than I could hope to do in any sort of like online purchase. And he thought about it, and he wasn't, you know, totally against it, but I could tell that he was like, you know, a little unsure that he wanted to go that low. And then, you know, when it wasn't looking like it was going to work out, I said, okay, well, you know, hey, you know, it's early on the show. I might just walk around and, you know, see if I can find this book elsewhere, but I appreciate it. And funny enough, that's when he was like, hey, well, you know, let me think about this for a second. And he actually stopped me from walking away. And he was like, okay, that's the number you have in your mind. You get these books both right now. You want to pay cash. Let's make a deal. Let's make it happen. So I was like, all right, well, this is it. And I opened up my wallet. I put all the cash on the table, and I picked up the first of two books that I'm going to show off to you. The other one will come tomorrow. But the first one I picked up is a beautiful copy of Fantastic Four, number 49. First full appearance of Galactus, second appearance of the Silver Surfer, first cover appearance of the Silver Surfer. And I know there's a little bit of glare, so let me just pull this out for you guys right here, just so you can see it a little bit better. Now, this is probably a 3.5 grade. That's what he had. He had it kind of listed at a VG. I think it's probably a little bit lower than that. I think it's probably like a 3.5 or so. I mean, depending on like if the grader at CGC was having a bad day, maybe they would make this thing a 3. But it definitely needs a press. can definitely be cleaned up, by someone. So I'll probably make the effort to have someone do that at some point. And I am ecstatic to have this book in my collection. This was one of those books that was on my wish list for 2021. I have definitely actively been kind of looking for this book. I've come across it a few times, but it was just never the right book for me. It was never at that price point that I wanted to get it for, especially being that this has been one of the absolute hottest books all this year. I mean, which is saying something because there's been so many hot books this year, but this one in particular, I don't know what it is. Everyone feels like Silver Surfer is coming. Maybe everyone feels like Galactus is coming. Fantastic Four is hot. This is one of the all-time great covers, in my opinion. I mean, Silver Surfer is one of my top 3 favorite superheroes of all time. But even aside from that, I mean, how can you say that this isn't one of the all-time great comic book covers, in my opinion? I'm going to continue to talk about my pickup in a second, but before we do, let's take a minute to talk about the sponsor of this video, 9panel. Now, I recently met these guys. These guys are comic book collectors themselves, and they spent the last few years talking to comic stores, dealers, comic book collectors, going to conventions all across the country in order to figure out a better way to buy and sell comic books online, and they created this company called 9panel. Now, I'm a big fan of this website because comics on 9panel are listed by great comic book sellers and LCSs from all over the US. It's easy to search for key books or browse by comic-specific categories. On 9panel, I can buy from as many shops as I want in a single checkout, and all transactions are secure and protected from fraud. If I want to sell books, I can set my own policies and create a custom branded shop page with filter and search features for my buyers, and their smart listing process helps me create better listings in less time. 9panel is a marketplace built just for comics by comic book collectors who love comics. So go check out 9panel and buy a book today. So one of the other things that I kind of wanted to talk about with this book and being able to like make this purchase and maybe, give some kind of value to you guys beyond just like showing off this book that I was able to pick up for myself is just talk about this idea of price memory, because this is something that, really affected my purchase of this book or me pursuing this book. Okay. This is a book that I've wanted in my collection for a very long time. We're talking like, years ago, I was always wanting this book, but I had always kind of put it off. And I remember it was around Christmas time of last year, and I was following tons of listings for this book. So it was at $380. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, just $380 just seems like too much. I don't know. I've bought a few, big books already. And boy, oh boy, have I been kicking myself for not having picked up that book last year in December. Like, I don't think you can find this book for less than like, $800, $900 on eBay. And it's a really hard pill to swallow to think that, this book might never go back to that $300 price point. Like, now that I have to feel like I have to fork over whatever it is, like, $900 for this book, it's hard to really digest that, overall. It's hard to think like that this book is worth that price because there was once a time when it was half that. So how then are you ever going to like get over this idea? Like, once you think that the book was a certain price and now you have to pay this, I mean, it's so hard to, actually take that leap for the book that you want. But want is the key word here, because what I had thought to myself and what I had told myself was, hey, Mickey, do you want this book, right? Do you want this book? And I think back to, some Warren Buffett investing advice. He was talking about this idea of investing in markets when they are super hot. Like, how does one actually make a purchase of a stock when a stock is already going to the moon? And ultimately what his advice was that time in the market is ultimately better than timing the market, right? So it doesn't matter if a certain stock you buy like at the height of the market, or maybe you buy it on the dip, or you buy it at the low market. It doesn't really ultimately matter if this is a stock that you are going to own for, say, 30 years. I kind of had that light bulb moment where to me it was like, yes, it's an extremely hot market right now. And maybe there's going to be this correction, or there's going to be a dip that I might be able to buy, this book at like a super, super good deal or super, super cheap score. But ultimately for me, this is a book that I want in my collection. And for, the foreseeable future, I'm just going to hold this book. Like, even if we do get, Galactus in the MCU, I'm not going to flip it. Like, this is a book that I'm going to own for the next, 50 years of my comic book collecting career. And what is the difference of a couple $100, on a hot book versus a cheap book if you're going to hold something for 50 years? I mean, there's no way in hell you can convince me that this book 50 years from now won't be at least the same value that I was able to pay it for. On top of that, I was able to get it at a pretty good deal. I mean, I ended up paying $700 in case you were wondering. And to me, that's kind of ultimately where it boils down, where it's like, you know, price memory for books that you ultimately want in your collection, it's okay to just go after that book. If you know that you want it, it doesn't matter, you know, if you're going to catch, you know, it at a high, or you're going to catch it at a low, or that the price is like, oh, it used to be this and therefore like it should still be that. None of that really matters. Ultimately, you just have to ask yourself, is this a book that you want in your collection? And are you going to keep it in your collection for a very long time? And if in fact the answer is that you are going to keep it in your collection for a very long time, then as long as you have the budget, as long as you have the means, as long as you find a deal relative to what is currently costing in the market, you don't need to worry about the fact that, oh, it's twice as expensive today than it was a year ago, and that maybe it'll go back down to those numbers, because 30 years from now, 40 years from now, 50 years from now, just at the rate of inflation alone, there's no way that this book is ever going to lose that value. So when I was able to convince myself of that, I was able to fork over the money I needed to get my hands on Fantastic Four 49, one of my all-time favorite covers. I absolutely love Galactus. I grew up reading Silver Surfer. This is definitely the key Silver Surfer book for me. You know, I would maybe want to get FF48 one day, but you know, I just have a bias against that cover. It's not as appealing to me, so I'm actually very happy owning Silver Surfer's second appearance. I would also maybe consider getting Silver Surfer #1 one day, like the big premiere issue. But you know, now that I have this one, I feel like I own a piece of history for the Silver Surfer character. I feel like, you know, I'm very satisfied in that sense, and I'm very happy to have this book. Well, that is all I have for this video. That was the first massive book I was able to pick. I will show off the other massive book in a video tomorrow. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I will see you in the next video.